I want to welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us. I know that it's a challenge sometimes on Zoom, but we're learning. This is the League of Women Voters of the Rogue Valley Candidate Forum for Jackson County Commissioner position number 2. We have scheduled a discussion of 50 to 60 minutes with the candidates, and this is a webinar, so you will not see attendees coming and going, but you will see the panelists. Representing the league organizers are Amanda Crittenden, who's operating the Zoom meeting from the state office. Myself, Kathleen Donham, I'm a voter service chair. Our president is Margie Peterson. Vice President Rick Bennett. Former voter service chair Norma Barrett is the timekeeper. I want to remind everyone that the league's nonpartisan Vote 411 is now fully operational. With the November 3rd candidates, and the ballot measure choices are all available online. You may have received your state voters guide by now, but Vote 411 will tell you which of those candidates and ballot measures will be on your specific ballot. The league printed voters guides will be arriving this week and will be on the state league website. We will be recording this webinar to link with the Vote 411 site. So after I introduce the candidates, we will read questions the league has prepared. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to respond to the questions, and the timekeeper, that's Normary, will warn you when 15 seconds are remaining and a red stop sign she's going to hold up when your time is finished. After the league's finished its questions, the audience will have an opportunity to ask questions through the Q&A function on your toolbar on your Zoom panel. This is a webinar. In addition to the candidates Dave Darter and Terry Martin, there's a third candidate, Edward Stanton, who's the Libertarian Party representative, who regrettably was not able to attend today. So the first candidate is Dave Darter. We can't see him, but he is there by phone. He's having a little trouble with the Zoom connection. He's a Republican from Ashland. He lists his occupation as Colonel, U.S. Marine Corps retired, and Consultant Disaster Preparedness on page 1510 of the Voter's Guide. The second candidate, Terry Martin. You want to raise your hand there, Terry? A Democrat from Medford. She lists her occupation as writer, journalist, and co-owner of DNS Harley-Davidson, and that's also from the Voter's Guide. So are there questions right now about how we're going to proceed? Because we'll begin with the first questions. Okay?
No.
Fine. No questions.
All right.
Okay. The first question is, you'll have 2 minutes to answer this. Do you approve of the way Jackson County Commissioners and Health Department have provided leadership during the COVID pandemic? That regard to the letter the governor, the commissioner sent, their modeling of behavior, and money to United Way. So will you go first, Terry, please?
Sure. I think that the Jackson County Health Department has done an excellent job of reporting cases, of doing outreach, of teaching people how to keep themselves safe, and is doing contact tracing. I've had 2 friends of mine test positive for the virus in the last 2 weeks. So I've been able to watch the health department in progress. In terms of the Jackson County Commissioners, I've been much more disappointed in their handling of this pandemic. They didn't seem to take it as serious, I think, as they should have. I think that they should not have held in-person meetings in the middle of summer. When they started to do that, they had to shut those down because anti-maskers started attending. I don't think they should have pushed back against state regulations. And I just feel at this point that they are not following the science and the public health officials that they should be following, because it's important that we get this pandemic or this virus under control before we can reopen everything else.
Thank you. Dave, did you hear the question? Would you like me to repeat it?
I did. I heard it. Okay. I just was waiting for you to ask me to go.
Right. Okay. Would you please respond as well?
I didn't want to jump in and until you said okay.
Okay.
said something to me. Okay, no, I agree with Terry that I believe that the health department did a great job, and they did a lot because I know they had some issues after talking with the director that getting some state resources down here, particularly for the contact tracing, which was a real concern of theirs, and so now they've caught up with that, and so they've done a great job there. I believe that I have not agreed with one of the current county commissioners and where she went with this, and I was not fully in agreement with her. But I do know that in talking with the other two county commissioners, they took this very, very seriously. They had some disagreements with the governor on what was being done, and they were particularly concerned at the very beginning of this that the governor was to come up with a policy for the state of one size fits all, and they wanted to make sure that everyone understood, and she understood that in fact Jackson County is not Multnomah County, it's not Wayne County, and the rural counties need to be treated differently, and they pushed very hard on that. And in credit to the governor, she altered her policies and started looking at this more on a regional basis and based upon the demographics and of the particular county. And I think that was a very, very good thing for them to do, to ask for and to request a different way to look at this based upon the needs of Jackson County. But I do know that they took it quite seriously.
Thank you, Dave. The second question kind of tacks on to the last one. Jackson County has experienced disaster in September with the wildfires and evacuations. Do you have opinions about the county's response to the emergencies in terms of communications, readiness, and planning? So can you go first this time, Dave, please?
Yeah, and I was very, very heavily involved in this with the out at the expo for the first 2 weeks of this, working with the Rogue Valley Community Organizations Acting in Disaster. We were supporting the county. The chair of our organization was at the EOC the night of the fires, working on that coordination. The COAD's mission, which is assigned into the Jackson County Emergency Operations Plan, specifically says that we're to work with the county on donations management and volunteers, which in fact we did, and we set up the county's donations point out at the expo, and also provided volunteers. For example, the first night we provided volunteers for the EOC phone banks, and I will say that I got a really good chance to watch this very, very close up, and watch the system and everything. There were clearly some things that I believe that we failed at and that we didn't do as well as we should have. And some of that involves prior planning. Some of that involves the alert system, which clearly had problems with it. I also witnessed and watched a situation where everybody was working really hard to do the best they could, but I can tell you that given the lack of information that you always have, of course, in a disaster such as this, or misinformation, which is part of the problem too, because you're getting misinformation, making decisions based upon misinformation that's been passed to you. I can also say that it's very clear to me that what we now need to do is to sit down and have a postmortem, a lessons learned session, and that needs to involve all the participants and
Okay.
a citizen committee. So those are the things that I wanted. So
Right.
I'll stop right there
Okay.
then. Okay.
There may be some more questions on this subject for you too, Dave.
Okay.
All right, the next question.
Do I get to respond?
We'll start with Terry Martin. Oh,
Do I get to respond to that?
Yes. Yes.
you want to
Yes.
respond to that? Okay, we'll give you 30 seconds.
Oh, I thought that at this point I had my 2 minutes to answer that question.
Oh, yeah, you have 2 minutes to answer. Excuse me, I see what you're saying. 2 minutes, yes.
Thank you very much.
Of course.
This disaster was pretty personal for me. I lost my business on South Pacific Highway to the fire. And my parents and my sisters, my nieces and nephews, all of us live in Phoenix Talent, and all of our houses were threatened. The fire came within a mile of all of us at some point. All of our houses survived, but we did lose the business. But I will just say that my focus on this has been on the alerts system and the lack of warning that were given to people, because I experienced it firsthand. My parents are 80 years old and live on the Culver Road in Talent, for example, did not receive any type of alert on their landline, possibly because the power was out and they have cordless phones, but there was nothing. I had to find them, track them down, then make them go home, pack their car as we watched the flames go across the back of their property. And then there was this huge rush of people trying to get out of Talent all onto Culver Road. So the evacuation system had not been practiced or planned well, because we could see the fire in our mirrors in our cars, but we could only move maybe about 2 miles an hour. It took me over an hour and a half, I think, to go 3 miles to get home. And so there were so many deficiencies, so many problems with their planning and their evaluations of this disaster, that there really has to be a serious reckoning and some kind of evaluation as to what went wrong, so that we can prevent this from happening again. I'll just say that it not only impacted people who lost homes and businesses and possessions and loved ones and pets in the fire, but it also is going to traumatize a lot of people for months, if not years to come. Most of the kids in the Phoenix Elementary School were displaced and lost their homes, and 50% of the kids in Talent. So we're going to be dealing not only with physical losses, but with emotional losses as well in the next year.
Thank you, Terry. I didn't mean to tell you, you just had 30 seconds. Of course, you had a full time to respond. So can you go ahead and take the next question first, please, Terry? The availability of affordable housing in Jackson County is low. How should county commissioners and the housing authority try to improve homelessness in our communities?
Oh, well, first of all, they need to include the housing authority in their meetings. They had a meeting here a week or so ago that involved bankers, developers, and real estate people, but the housing authority people were sitting on the side of the meeting, as well as the advocates for people that had lost their homes, for example, the Hispanic community. So there needs to be better communication and more inclusion going forward as to how we begin growing. That said, most affordable housing and dense developments are done within city limits. And so this really needs to be something that Phoenix and Talent are pretty much the point on, as they decide how they want to rebuild and how they want to provide housing to the people to live there, to keep them here and not lose them. If we're not careful, we're going to lose a lot of the workforce of Jackson County. The people that lived in those mobile home parks were supports for a lot of the agriculture, be it vineyards, the tourism industry in Ashland, Harry and David, et cetera, et cetera. If we're not careful, we're going to be losing 2,500 households in this process if we don't come up with housing soon and a way and a plan to keep them there. So Jackson County is probably going to be the communication hub on this and be able to come up with the resources and to help. But the most important thing to me is that everyone is at that table having a conversation about this and all these voices are heard.
Thank you. Dave, can you respond to her, please?
Yes.
Or not to her,
and I
but to the
agree
question.
Yes. Thank you. Yes, I agree that everyone certainly needs to be at the table, and that's something that we really need to work very, very hard at. In response to what's happening right now, we're seeing that we need to streamline our our building code process and our land use process. And in fact, that's being worked on right now. That is clearly a responsibility of the county working with the cities, because the county is that connector between the cities, and of course they're responsible for the unincorporated areas, and also the state. And so that's an extremely important function that the county can work with. And there's going to need to be, the issue here is that Oregon has a very, very strong top-down land use building code regime in which the state, through legislation and through administrative rules, places a tremendous burden in some cases, but also very, very closely regulates these issues. And so as we go forward here, we're going to need to make sure that the county, working with the state and with the cities, work to streamline that and speed that up. That said, I also happen to believe that this is a golden opportunity for us to take a hard look at just what is it that has been, even before the fires, was causing us to not build as much affordable housing, and what were the things that were getting in the way of building that affordable housing. In many cases, that happens to be with the availability of land, and that has a dramatic impact. And I believe that the county can work very closely with the cities to determine that. And I believe those are the kinds of things that need to be done, both in response to this disaster, but looking into the future of, because even before this disaster, we know we weren't building enough affordable housing.
Thank you, Dave. Those are the questions that we had pre-prepared. We also have a question from Rick Bennett, our Vice President, to both of you. So I'll let Rick explain that question, and then we'll start off with
Kathleen,
Terry answering it first. Okay.
Kathleen, don't you have
Yes.
one more question here about the priorities of cleaning up and recovering from
Oh, we have another one. Excuse me. Yes, thank you.
there you go.
So this will be Terry starting this one again. Oh, excuse me, this will be Dave starting this one again. What should the county's priorities be in cleaning up and recovering from the wildfires?
The absolute first priority is to make sure that you've taken the time to sit down and organize yourself properly based upon, quite frankly, FEMA doctrine and FEMA rules, because the federal government has put together some exceptional basics for this is how you organize yourself. In fact, I just went online this last week and took their online course in the National Disaster Recovery Framework, which lays out all these things that have to be done. And it's very, very clear that what you don't want to do is you don't want to start doing things without first thinking about, well, how do I organize myself? And there are various groups, including citizen advisory groups and things that the elected leaders, I don't want to go into the detail of that, obviously in 2 minutes, I don't have time to do that. That is absolutely the first priority, is to make sure that you've got yourself organized, because one of the clear requirements of a recovery process is that you have a clear organization that's going to look at the issues in a prioritized fashion, and so that you can make the proper decisions. Then once you've done that, and I know that's ongoing, and of course you have to still continue to respond, and we're now moving from the response phase into the recovery phase. You need to sit down and you need to plan that out, while at the same time engaging in certain recovery operations, such as interim housing for people, and that means working with folks like the Red Cross, who are responsible in the plan for that sheltering and all. And then obviously, then you start to get into, okay, now you can be thinking about, okay, what's the cleanup? What's the trash removal? What about the hazardous waste? What about streamlining the building codes and streamlining the land use so that you can move through this very, very quickly?
Okay.
You need to put people to work for economic development, and that's when you get yourself into that process.
Thank you, Dave. So
really,
Terry,
really
your
quick,
response?
really quick from the black void here. Dave can't see our time cards, so we will have to.
Oh, right. We'll have to
jump in pretty
remind you. I
quickly.
beg your pardon. Right, of course.
I'm just putting
And
up.
that's okay. I don't mind you stepping in like that. Just let me know if I'm not looking at my watch, but just let me know. Just give me a ding if you want to.
No, I don't think that'll be necessary. Terry, are you have,
Okay.
you have a response to that too?
I think that Dave laid out the FEMA part of that really well. I mean, we have to be able to work with the federal government because they have the resources and the knowledge and the experience to help us go through something like this that we've never really gone through before. I think we can also talk to such communities as Paradise and some of the communities down in California that have gone through some of these wildfires too, to learn from what they have experienced. I know that I've talked to a few people who said they made some mistakes and if they had to do it over again, they would do it differently. And I'm trying to learn as I go along here as to what those mistakes were and how they apply to Jackson County. The other part of that is that I'm real concerned with waste management at this time. I'm not really sure the amount of, living here in Phoenix and Talent, when you drive these streets, you realize that we could probably build another Mount McLaughlin out of all of the rubble that is in these mobile home parks and businesses all along the highway. I'm really concerned that we do the right thing with the refuse that we're going to be dealing with, and even with my own dealership. I was pulling motorcycles out of the rubble yesterday for a few hours with my team, and it's a horrendous and huge issue that we're going to have getting rid of all of the waste. The last part of this, if I have enough time, is having to do with that temporary housing as we go forward. And I'm really concerned with the land regulations, very much like Dave is, but I'm concerned as somebody who's lived in Phoenix and Talent for 50 years, that they're going to begin trying to let them grow into areas that are open space and agricultural lands. The urban growth boundary means something to me. I covered it when I was a reporter at the Mill Tribune so many years ago. I understand that open space between cities is crucial to the rural feel and the place that we love. And so I would really be concerned about doing too lax of rules and starting to violate the agreement that we had in terms of maintaining those open spaces.
Thank you,
Can I
Terry.
add one thing back into? I'm not in response to what Terry said, but one thing I think is really important that people who are on this webinar understand about disaster recovery, disaster response is it is the absolute responsibility of local officials to drive the train. It's very, very clear, and sometimes this gets lost in this argument about, well, how come FEMA's not doing this? How come the state's not doing this? The answer is that doctrine is very clear that it is the responsibility of the local officials to set the framework, to put things in place, and then work with the state and FEMA for the things that they will do.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's good to know, Dave.
I think a lot of people miss that, and so that's why the role of the county commissioners and the mayors is so important in this.
Terry, do you have a response to that particularly? We're giving you some extra time here.
No, he's right. I think that these decisions need to be made on the local level, and Phoenix and Talent have already begun having meetings to talk about how they plan to rebuild and how they're going to try to use this as an opportunity to make it better, but also still make it affordable. It's incredibly important that these people be able to come back to the community.
Thank you. So those are our questions that the League has prepared. And then we have one from Rick Bennett now. And I'd like Terry to answer that one first. So Rick, do you want to kind of set it up for us? What about your question, please?
Thank you, Kathleen. First of all, I'd like to kind of transition from issues to process. in recent years, there's been much emphasis on transparency in government, and particularly elected officials making their meetings public and making their decisions in public as well. But there's also an issue related to what information the elected officials are receiving that inform their deliberations and their votes. And I think in that regard, Jackson County, the Board of Commissioners, still there's room for improvement. It's difficult for residents, even if they're attending not only the regular board meetings, but the work sessions and staff meetings, to know what documents, what materials the commissioners are receiving to inform them on issues. And if you can identify those documents, it's difficult for the average citizen to obtain them. You have to fill out a public records request form. You have to determine what office or department actually has those documents, go there in person, pay a fee, and then receive the documents themselves. And having done that, there are limited opportunities for individuals to actually provide input to commissioners before they actually take a vote. There are only a few issues that by statute require a public hearing. The rest are all done by executive order. And so my question to both of you is, first of all, what are your general thoughts about transparency in government and its decision making? And secondly, are you open to considering some changes to make the process more open and accessible to the average citizen in Jackson County?
Terry?
Yes. Yes, I was a reporter for the Mail Tribune for 14 years. And back in that day, those of you who are around back in that time, we had a full-time reporter that covered Jackson County and would write 2 to 3 stories a day about what they were considering, what the options were. And everyone knew who their county commissioners were. Everybody knew the issues. Everybody knew the background behind the issues. And unfortunately, media does not have that ability or desire. I'm not sure what's happening today, but we don't have a dedicated county reporter that's giving us all this information. So now it's falling on the citizen, and it's way too burdensome to fall on the citizen. As somebody who's now a citizen and not a reporter, I mean, to try and get information right now just to run as a candidate, lengthy process and takes hours of my time to try and catch up on the meetings, et cetera, and all the work sessions. It is way too much. So I would think that there should be a public information officer, number one, with Jackson County Commissioners. If there isn't already one, I can't seem to find someone that holds that position. And I do think that that person should be able to provide information and documents at all time. If and when elected, as a reporter, I'm telling you, I'd be telling you everything I know. I would probably be reporting out of the county at all times. And not only that, not only just from the meetings, but as a reporter, to me, it's really important to be on the ground talking to people who are impacted by these issues. So if we're going to talk about homelessness, I'm going to go out into the community and talk to people who are homeless and talk to the people who are working with them to try and bring this information back to the county commission. So that's kind of how I would approach this. And I'm all for transparency and everything we can get out there in original documents that could probably even be linked to all of their meetings and on a website so people could get those.
Thank you, Terry. Dave Goddard, you have 2 minutes. Do you have something on this issue, please?
Yeah, I completely agree with Terry on that. And I also, having worked up in the state legislature on the budget process, and I can assure you that whatever is happening in Jackson County is not even close to what happens in your state legislature when it comes to hiding the ball on how that budget is produced. I found it to be one of the most bizarre ways of doing things, and it made me very, very conscious of how much the decisions are being made in which you should be putting this information out on the web. I mean, it's really not that big a deal. It shouldn't be this difficult in this age of digital communications, because the odds are that the information is going to the county commissioners in a digital format. So there's no reason why that same information can't just be put on the web. And here's the meeting, and here's the background materials. Having been on a planning commission, I know that they put all that information that we as planning commissioners got. All that was available to the citizens of Ashland. And I mean, it was hundreds of pages. And so you can do that. There's no reason why that can't be done. And so I just think that as we've seen in the past, that the transparency is a very, very good thing. Again, I also worked with Dennis Richardson up there when he was Secretary of State, and that was one of the things that he just was very big on. And again, I watched how he was working to make sure that that information was getting to the state folks. There's no reason why we can't do that here in Jackson County.
15 seconds.
I'm done.
Oh, you're done. Already.
I'm done. I'm done.
So that kind of concludes the league questions that we had prepared. We've got a system today that's not exactly chat as far as eliciting questions from the audience that's here. We're going to use the Q&A. If you go down to your toolbox on your Zoom page, there's a Q&A option. Do I have that right, Amanda?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. So,
there is a question that I'm just looking at the letter you sent me. There was a third question that said management of hemp and marijuana agriculture.
yeah, we had some members that decided I should get rid of that question.
Okay.
But,
I just was.
yeah.
You said you had gone through all the questions that you handed out. I thought, wait a minute, I remember reading 4 questions.
You did.
Okay.
You were right.
All right.
So anyway, somebody like me may have some questions about that further. Margie is going to be handling the questions that we get, so she'll read them to us, and then again, Norm Mary will be the timekeeper. You may not need 2 minutes to answer some of these, but that's what you're allowed. So go ahead and get your questions submitted if you haven't done that already.
Okay, right now we have 3 questions. The first question, and I believe Dave will be starting, correct? Since he just finished.
Yes.
The question is, please prioritize between these 2 choices. The first one would be public health and safety. The second would be law enforcement and safety. What are the reasons for your choice? So in other words, can you put, which one is more important to you? Public health and safety or law enforcement? Which one should be emphasized?
Oh, well, I got to tell you something. I don't see a dichotomy there at all. I think you do both of them, and you work them together, and they need to be joined together, and that's what I think the county commissioners should be doing. I would not prioritize one over the other. Those 2 items are higher priority, for example, than potholes on county roads. It's just for an example. I can prioritize that, but I would refuse to prioritize between those 2. What you really need to do is you need to recognize that those two items are joined together, and there's a nexus between them, and you need to make sure that they're functioning together. And that's a very difficult thing to do. Again, I don't make that priority or that prioritization. Thank you.
Terry?
Thank you.
If I had to choose, I'd say public health and safety. I've always felt that Jackson County is a giant umbrella arching over the entire county that is responsible for public health and safety of the people who live here. I think law enforcement is part of providing that. So it'd be underneath that. And it's one of the tools that we have for providing that public health and safety, but it's only a tool. And it's not a choice that we have to make. We just have to decide how we use that law enforcement to keep the people of Jackson County safe and healthy. I think there's been a lot of people that want to make that choice between those 2. And I think we need to probably look at some other ways to use different organizations and different responses to people that have mental health and safety issues. Instead of using law enforcement, for example, I'm a big advocate of bringing in a crisis response team that would be a mobile team that could come and respond to, which is an estimated 20% of the calls that Jackson County gets regarding homelessness, mental health issues, and substance abuse. The COOTS model in Eugene has been tremendously successful, saving Eugene approximately something like $8 million a year on a $2 million budget. And I'm just all about looking at alternatives to law enforcement to providing that public health and safety.
Thank you. The next question: as state and local actions are made to help with recovery from fires, there are suggestions that regulations regarding asbestos removal be weakened or perhaps waived. What are your thoughts about that? Warranted under the circumstances or too dangerous to consider? That would be you, Terry.
I think I would default to the scientists on this one. I mean, I don't like asbestos, and I think that we should take utmost care in dealing with it. If the science officials say that it's okay for us to weaken those, then I would go for it. But if the regulations are there to keep people safe, we've got to do what the regulations say.
Thank you, Dave.
Yeah, I would concur with that. There are. When I was listening in on this discussion that the Home Builders Association had about this very issue of streamlining and speeding up the process because of the fires and because of the emergency and all, there never was any discussion about doing something unsafe. I mean, that was that when you do the cost benefit analysis, you just go, look, there are some things that you just don't do, and weakening asbestos regulations or hazardous materials regulations is not the right way to go. So I would be completely against doing something like that.
Thank you. The next question: what can county commissioners do regarding climate change? That would be you, Dave.
Yeah, my answer to that would be, as a county commissioner, would be to sit down with those that have come forward with different ideas about dealing with the issue, and see where we can have some agreements on those kinds of things. And so I think this needs to be just a discussion. And I have said, for example, people have asked me, do we need to write a plan and all this other stuff? I don't think we need to go to that level. I think there's some very, very simple things that we can do that we can all agree on and to move forward. So that's how I would handle it. What are some things that we're doing that would have an impact and that are not going to cause untoward issues down the line in terms of what it's going to be, what it means to the people that it may have an impact, such as businesses and those kinds of things.
Terry?
I feel like climate change is the issue of our time. I think that it needs to provide a filter for us in that every decision made by the Jackson County Board of Commissioners needs to consider how it might impact climate change and the climate crisis that we're in. There's the tail, sorry. The climate change conditions certainly made the wildfire worse that we experienced on September 8th. And Jackson County needs to create a climate action plan. They need to join the national movement of county action, county climate action that was started by some counties in California to look at what other counties are doing. They need to consider it in all their zoning and regulations and developments. They need to consider it when they allow or encourage businesses to settle here. And they need to do their own assessment of their fleet, their buildings, and their county practices to make sure that the county is setting the standard for what everyone should be doing to counteract this.
Thank you. The next question, where do you each stand in regard to the pipeline? Do you approve or disapprove? We're talking about LNG. Jordan Cove.
Am I first?
Yeah.
I think I'm first, yeah. I am against the pipeline in that it feels like it's got too many factors here that don't add up. What this would allow would be a Canadian company to send gas through the United States to go to Coos Bay to be exported to other countries, which really doesn't impact us except for the fact that we're hosting that pipeline. And with that pipeline comes a lot of environmental risks, a lot of eminent domain problems over people's properties who don't want it to cross. I can't remember how many streams and waterlands it's supposed to go across, but the environmental risks are there, and it doesn't result in that many jobs in the end. I mean, there's going to be some people come to build the pipeline, but those are going to be people probably from out of state, not local workers. And the people in Coos Bay, it's a very small number of people that are going to benefit from having this pipeline end there on the coast. So I'm against it on all levels.
Dave?
I'm against it from the standpoint of eminent domain. I have severe issues with that part of it. However, I believe that it does have an economic impact, and it can be very, very. I think we would be missing a golden opportunity here to have economic development and to be exporting a natural resource. And much of this gas, in fact, is coming from the United States and being exported overseas. And I think that it will have a very beneficial economic impact, again, particularly down the coast, but also in our area too. And I believe that the environmental issues can be addressed. I've seen places where they have these pipelines that go across major rivers, and in fact that can be safely done, and the environmental regulations, those environmental issues can be addressed.
Thank you. The next question will be for you, Dave. COVID cases are growing and alarming in Jackson County. Do you have thoughts to change behavior to stop this pandemic?
Well, I mean, the answer is very clear on that in terms of, and that's following the science of what we know about how to deal with this. Now, that science has been changing. If we all go back and think about way back in March when this February, March when this started, which quite frankly right now seems like a lifetime ago. We've seen changes in guidance and all, and so it seems to me that it's very, very clear when you're dealing with it at an individual level that in fact just following that science and the guidance that you're getting from the CDC is clearly the way to go.
Terry?
This is really hard. As somebody whose business was open from March onward, our Harley-Davidson dealership was considered transportation, which is essential. I guess people need their Harleys to get to work and get to doctor's appointments and things, I guess. So we were open the entire time. It was a huge struggle to get to have people wear masks. For the longest time, we had signs up on the doors. We would encourage people. All of our staff was wearing masks, and it still became incredibly difficult for people to understand that this is essential for us to stopping this virus. And I don't want it to get to the point where we are now the cases keep mushrooming to the point, I think we're at almost 1,300 cases today, 6 deaths. And it's not necessarily going in the right direction. So we're going to have to do something to somehow make mask wearing okay. And I don't know how that's a behavioral science question to me, because it was a real struggle with us from a business perspective. Once the governor had come out with the statewide mandate saying masks must be worn, we saw a definite rise in people wearing them when we came in. Although there were people that would wear them over their ears and under their chins, which I saw at the Jackson County Airport the other day when I was taking my daughter to fly home to DC. I mean, like 6 people in front of me had the masks on, but they were under their chins from their ears. And so there's going to have to be some some behavioral modification that we're doing so that, number one, it's okay for you to step up and say, would you please pull your mask up? And that's going to have to be okay to the person to hear that. And somebody who has more science background in terms of behavioral science than me is going to have to teach me how to do that. But it's tricky. But we're going to have to do that, and we're going to have to keep social distancing, and we're going to have to keep everything as closed as possible, and just be more aware. I mean, the very first person to die in Southern Oregon was my friend's husband. Her story was told in the Grants Pass Courier yesterday, and it's very real to me, and I think we all need to take this very seriously.
Thank you. We have another climate change question.
Margie, we probably ought to just have one more question and be done.
At the moment, this is the last question, so I think
okay.
we're good. Terry, what county effort would you support for reducing our contribution to accelerating climate change?
I think I outlined them a little bit in the earlier question, but I do think that the county needs to do a complete audit of its buildings, its fleet, and the county practices. I'm a person that turns off all vampire appliances at home, for example. They say that something like 30% of your electric bill goes to appliances. They're not on, they're just plugged in, for example. And there have been nights when I've walked by, for example, the local elementary school and seen, 30 computers still plugged in and sucking on electricity. And I don't know what the practices are for Jackson County, but I think we need to start looking at what we are doing. How often do they send people out in carpools? How many unnecessary car trips do they make as county employees? So there's practices like that we can look at. We can look at making the buildings more energy efficient and perhaps starting a solar element of that. I think requiring developments to have to be more sustainable when they're actually developed in Jackson County would be big, as well as making sure that everyone out there is aware of climate change and the things that they can do. I think there's an element of education for the people in Jackson County. We need to return the master recycling program, for example, and begin trying to spend part of our time as the county teaching people how to save energy and to be part of the solution.
Thank you. Dave?
Yeah, because of my operational planning background, I tend to be a person that's menu driven or option driven. And what that means to me is you bring in a group of people and you sit down and you come up with, okay, here are 5 or 10 things we could do. I'm just throwing those numbers out there, maybe more than that. And you put them on the table, and then you do a cost benefit analysis and look at them and say, well, which one's going to have the greatest impact for the least cost? Or is going to have the greatest impact. And so rather than me right now coming up with what those things might be, you would need to take a look at putting that list together. And there would be a process for that. And as I mentioned in my last discussion about this, that would be something that I think that the county and the county commissioners need to do.
Thank you, Dave.
So, Margie,
that's our last.
I'm going to read the final question that I had about marijuana, and that'll be the end, outside of the 2 closing statements from the candidates. So, marijuana sales in Jackson County were over 5 million this last May, 2 million more than last May. How do you think Jackson County citizens are adjusting to the new agriculture and processing in their county? So, Dave?
I view both of those products, and you said marijuana, but I assume you're also thinking about the hemp.
The hemp,
because
yes.
I sat down with a group of hemp growers, marijuana. There were 6 of them, and I think 2 of them also grew marijuana, and the THC, I should say, to that part of it. And it was very clear to me that one of the things they wanted to, and I assured them that that's what I would do as a county commissioner is, look, this is a legal product. This should be treated just like any other agricultural product that we have here. This is a rural county, and we have a great history of supporting agriculture, and we should continue to do that. And we should also, though, continue to make sure it's being done in the right way. and they will tell you that there's a little bit of there's some Wild West out there, and there's some people out there that are not following the rules, and that needs to be done. But let's just look at this also from an economic standpoint. What they also said was shocking was the fact that because of the way we have sometimes structured our building codes and our land use codes and things like that, most of these products that are grown here are not processed here. And those are some really good paying jobs. That's criminal. I mean, one of the guys said, look, I've got all this stuff I'm growing. There's nobody here that will process it for me, so I'm sending it to Nevada. And he said, this is ridiculous. I could take it down the road and we could have some really good paying jobs. So I think that's something that I'm going to really focus on is why is that happening, that these products are leaving our area and not being processed here. We should be doing all of the above.
Thank you. So Terry, do you have some comments on that, please?
Yeah, I do think that hemp is probably almost like the biggest secret. People don't talk about it. It's estimated to generate about 300 million, I guess, in the economy for Jackson County. There are more acres being grown. There's over 10,000 acres now in hemp as compared to, I think, about 7,000 to 8,000 in pears and grapes combined. It has made not only the economic impact of putting tax money into municipalities as well as the county budgets, but it's also paid a lot of people that have small farms that are leasing out their properties. They can lease out from between 1,000 to 5,000 per acre. And some of these people are delighted to have someone come in and operate their property. There are some risks with that. Of course, people are a little bit afraid of the hemp product itself and some of the shadier sides of things that can happen with that. And that's something we're going to have to deal with. But I would think that something that's this large in terms of that's now the largest agricultural project in Jackson County, and we're the largest county. We have more grows per county than any other county in Oregon. It's something that we have to pay attention to and find ways to live with it, because it's here, and we're all just going to have to understand that it is here and that it's part of our economy.
Thanks, Terry. So we're going to wind up today, and I'd like to give 2 minutes to each candidate to tell us why they think they do well at this job as county commissioner in Jackson County. We're taking over Commissioner Strasser's job. So, Terry, you want to go first?
Sure.
And explain why you want to be commissioner.
All right. I've lived in Jackson County for 50 years. And during that time, I have been a student, a teacher at SOU. I taught there for 25 years, taught journalism. I was a reporter for the Mail Tribune. And I also have spent the last 29 years learning how to run my family business, DNS Harley Davidson. It's a lot of different ways of seeing the Valley. It's a lot of different ways of approaching the people who live here. As a reporter, I think I probably interviewed thousands of people to write stories about their situations and their problems and their issues and help them come up with solutions. I felt like that was a job that was deeply steeped in public service. I feel it's time for me to go back into public service now, but I'm coming back at it with a business background, understanding a little bit more about how businesses work and relate, as well as getting to know people from a whole different spectrum in this county when you're talking about Harley riders, because they do go the spectrum, everything from your doctors to your club members. And I've gotten to know people and I've listened to them. I mean, as a reporter, first and foremost, as a journalist, I talk to people, I ask them about what's important to them, and I've learned a lot about Jackson County just being as part of this business. So I'm hoping that when I serve on the board that I will be an independent voice. As a reporter, I feel like my strengths are getting to know people, getting to understand issues, digging deep, into those issues, finding experts, finding solutions, and most importantly, being an independent voice on the commission. Because the way journalists work is that you may have an idea about how things should go, and then when you get deep into the facts, you realize it's a whole different story. And so I'm all about digging into issues, telling those stories, and doing the best I can for Jackson County.
Thank you, Terry. Dave, do you want to share with us your thoughts?
Yeah, my thoughts on this are that I have an extensive background in working with large, complex organizations and a graduate degree in strategic and operational planning and how pieces fit together and how you make plans and how you work issues between the various groups in a cooperative way. And I know that may sound a little funny coming from somebody who was in the military, because everybody thinks that everything is so set piece and everybody just follows, and that's absolutely not true. There are a lot of things that happen in those complex organizations that really do involve compromise and cooperation and working together and understanding what the goals are. Having worked up in the state legislature with Dennis Richardson on the budget, I understand the budget of Oregon, and I understand very, very clearly, it was very clear to me what that impact is on the counties, and also how state legislation has an impact. And we're seeing that right now, how all these state policies that are out there during COVID and during this recovery phase and things like that, how important those are, and how you need to be working on those kinds of things. And I view this position as a totally nonpartisan position, and I view it as a position that represents all the people of this area and bringing them into the discussion and considering their viewpoints. I just think those are some of the things that a commissioner has to do, because at the end of the day, the Board of Commissioners is like the board of large organizations, corporations, or companies, and those kinds of things, setting policy and strategies and priorities. And that's the way that I would look at it.
Thank you, Dave. So that concludes our agenda for today. I want to thank the candidates for making time. Dave Dutter, especially with having to do it by phone. Terry, thank you very much.
Thank you.
This will be on the Vote 411. So if voters are looking at the League's Vote 411 site, this will be linked to it, and they can review the whole hour if they want to. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Kathleen.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.